Hello. So, a factor of humans that we've been fighting for a while, I'm going to tie to a single topic, which is politics. And I would like to describe to you, first off, by saying politics is, of course, the way of governance and how humans govern individual cultures, society, and that. So politics is governance by humans. And I will be today explaining about the big divisions, about how US politics has grown more divisive, and we don't really come together on a lot of issues anymore, and things have just become worse off than better. I will also be describing a little bit of origins of US political division and give some key examples about how there's differences between US politic division and division in other nations regarding politics. So I'd like to start off by saying we do know there is a set date for when political division in this country began, and that was 1796 with the political election, the second presidential election between the Federalist candidate John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, who was the anti-Federalist candidate. And this was, by the way, political parties were just invented about 2 years earlier, so this is all fairly new territory for them. And one would think that, oh, we would be civilized and we would respect each other, but within 2 years, like, this election was absolutely ridiculous. The amount of divisiveness that was shown here, not only was there lies and perjury that was going on, but there was slanders against each other. There was hate messages, like John Adams called Thomas Jefferson a hermaphrodite, and the other way around, he said he was dead, and it was just absolutely ridiculous. But this is just a key example about how US politics, you could argue that we have been inclusive with the Republican and Democrat Party before, but in truth, since the beginning, there have been most times saying that both parties have been separated from each other and they don't agree on a lot of issues. Now, I'd like to get to my first point, which is made by the Washington Post, and they said, since our country's founding, the Democrat and the Republican Party, which I'm going to say for now is the entirety of United States politics, haven't agreed on a lot of things, but they've agreed on at least the problems, and they've set the central foundation for that. But a main catalyst, as of recent years, in the past 3 years, which has completely changed that, is the 2016 presidential campaign between President Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And that was because the Washington Post recognizes that now both parties aren't even agreeing on the problems at hand. So we're going even further back. So now nobody's talking to each other. We have severe, I should say that because that they won't agree with each other, it's now affecting state governments and through that local governments. So before, I could easily say that, why should you care? It doesn't really affect you personally, but now it is actually affecting you personally and your local governments. So I'm going to describe a little bit about some major consequences that this kind of political divisiveness comes. And the first major one I want to say is an actual action which is called government shutdown. And that's when the Congress, which is made up of House of Representatives and the Senate, if they can't really agree on something, including with the president, judicial branch doesn't really play a part in this, but if those three kind of factors of our government don't cooperate with one another, an action called government shutdown occurs, which basically the budget, which I believe it's the House of Representatives sets, if they can't agree with the Senate and the President, and there's other factors in it that they can't agree on, they shut the government down. And some important things to know is all federal workers, which are like the post office, there's just a whole list of them, they don't get laid off, but they get temporarily furloughed, so nobody's getting paid, so you got mass unemployment for God knows how long these last, because they can range from a week to, I believe the longest one was 2 months, so they can be quite harmful. Second is national parks. since those are federal institutions technically, they're not being maintained. And thirdly is that our main body of government, which runs this nation, is for a time dead, which if you think about it in a more, like, take a step back and you think about it in a more idealistic perspective, it's absolutely crazy. Like, we are defenseless in a sense. And that actually ties into another thing. The military, large amounts of the military, since the budget is reliant on that, they are not being paid and they're being furloughed. So our nation isn't the leader of the free world in that time being. So that's just an example of how the U.S. Politics can have great impact negatively if they don't agree. And some, like, to look on it from an outsider's perspective, as divisive as we are, I fear that one day we could reach the point where either an example is I believe this is in 2012, in Japan, their Congress is called the National Diet. Both parties, I don't know the party names, they're in Japanese, they literally had a full-on brawl, like fist fight between all these representatives in their National Diet House. So we haven't reached that point yet, but we've gotten to a point where now, as they say, reaching across the aisle, which is a phrase politicians use, to come together on certain points, we're not even doing that anymore. I could say the big key people that are leading this kind of divisiveness on the liberal side would be Chuck Schumer, who's an avid, he's not for Republicans, I just want to say that. And then Mitch McConnell, who's the majority leader of the Senate for Republicans. He also is against the Democrats. And kind of these people are being led hand in hand. But you kind of notice, as I tied back earlier, a big catalyst is President Trump, who not only is widening this kind of gap, but he's also taking swings at his own party. And I really do fear the day when a man who's in the highest in office isn't even represented by his own party anymore, which by now I could accurately say that they have pretty much abandoned him. So I'd like to get to my next point, which is by Politico, and they said about voting, which is what I want to talk to you about, which is the main solution you can do. Luckily, this is a representative democracy, and you have, it's not like, oh, I can suggest a solution to you and we can try to wriggle around that. You guys actually have a direct solution to fix this problem, and that is to vote. Whether it be in your local elections, midterms, presidential elections, you have the power to decide on who gets to represent this nation. And whether they want to, work with the opposite, I don't want to say enemy, but work with someone who doesn't have your views, because one of the beauties of this nation is that we get to discuss our political beliefs and have that certain sense of security that we don't need to be, beaten, persecuted, or otherwise driven out like countries in the Middle East or South Asia that they don't even have two parties, they just have one party military dictatorships. So that is a beauty about America, and it's sad to say that the minority of senators and representatives that want to come together are being overshadowed by the majority of congressmen who would rather stick it to the man with the other party. So Politico is mainly trying to say also that it really is up to you guys to fix this problem. No one else is going to fix it because you are the voters. You are the people who decide who runs this nation. You're the people who decide whether this nation is together or against it. And to kind of tie in all this together, to leave you with a central message, you may think that, oh, I'll deal with this problem next year, or 2020, or when I see fit to it. But you need to understand that we are in a downhill spiral when it comes to American politics, and we have regressed beyond what anyone would have expected 100 years ago. So if we want to fix this problem, we have to turn around now. We have to vote for people we believe to be, who have integrity. And most of all, We have to preserve the future generation of our children, our grandchildren, because if we don't fix this problem now, there might not be United States politics for them to agree on in the future. So thank you for listening to me, and
Manuel, what did you think? He's not here? All right, well, I'll tell you what I thought. I don't think your attention device works very clearly. I don't know exactly what it is you're advocating. You basically sound an alarm, but it's a general alarm about politics without necessarily identifying what the issue in politics is. The notion that there is divisive political activity going on, I don't think that's too hard to identify. The notion that it's caused by something in particular, that's maybe an argument that says it's because of this. It's because, you point the finger at Schumer and McConnell and Trump, and I guess maybe that's ultimately what your argument is, that these are the political figures that are responsible for the divisiveness in politics. Although you give us like this whole history lesson about how we've always been divisive, how when the Federalists and the Anti-Federalist campaign in 1796, they were full of lies and slanders, and they said these horrible things about each other. I'm going, okay, so how's that different? What's different about that than what's going on now? And we seem to be around 200 years later, so you're the one who brought up this comparison, and I'm going, that comparison doesn't show that there's really a big problem other than divisiveness always exists. Maybe there's something about the divisiveness that existed then that created huge problems that were insolvable, and that's if you could give us the example from then, maybe we could draw an analogy to what's going on now, but I don't know that there's really much of an analogy that's going on. Most of this speech sounds like it's basically an informative speech talking about what the government is doing now, what problems you see existing there. I'm not sure there's a lot of controversy on some of these points. The notion that the government shutdown, for instance, occurs because of political divisiveness. Well, there are disagreements about spending priorities, about what action should be taken. If you want to show that the government shutdowns are a result of political issues that aren't really related to the budget process, that I think would maybe make an argument that says there's something different about this. One side or the other is using this as a wedge to get something that they want instead of fixing a problem that's right in front of us. Okay, make an argument about that, but there's not really anything like that that's presented here. You just tell us what the consequences of a shutdown are, and I'm not sure, again, that there's anything other than information here, not much of an argument. And at the end, it's basically you say, well, the way to solve this problem is to vote. Well, how do you think we got Schumer and McConnell and Trump in the first place? They all got voted in. So the notion that this is a solution to a problem seems like it ignores the very problem that you presented. There's got to be some other explanation as to what it is that's happening here. It just feels like it's 10 minutes of general talk about the subject and around the subject without necessarily having a particular point that we're going to get at the end of this. That what I'm persuaded of is that there are problems, and I'm not sure that I needed to be persuaded that there were problems. I think that we always knew that there were problems. That some of them are related to differences of opinion on what's right or wrong. I think there's an argument to be made here that the divisiveness has gotten out of hand. I think there are ways that you could identify what's caused it to get out of hand, and there are ways to show that that divisiveness is going to create problems for us in the future. But the way it is presented here, I don't think that you're building an argument here. You're mostly just kind of describing things that you think are true about this, and it's not leading to a conclusion that I think is very powerful. You're suggesting there's a downward spiral. Well, let's get a negative visualization here. What's going to happen? What's the positive visualization that we're going to have if we fix this problem? How do we fix this particular problem? Voting is your solution, and we already vote. So I'm not exactly sure. Tell us who to vote for. Tell us who not to vote for. Tell us what kinds of people to avoid voting for. Give us some kind of direction. That's what I think you need to have in your speech. You do a great job at presenting. I mean, you don't have any problem speaking to us. You look at everybody, you're engaged, you speak in an interesting way, so you're doing those kinds of it. All of that is fine. You don't have any problem there. You're doing a good job on that. Focusing on what the argument is, that's the thing that I think is problematic here. All right, thank you.